Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DM show. Hey, Martin.
Hi, Deirdre. Nice to see you and nice to see everyone here. And as we do every single time we get together, we encourage you just to say who you are and where you're from in the chat, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. I'm trying a new setup this week, so hopefully I'll be able to see the comments in the chat just because
Okay.
my screen setup has set up. So if we're a little slower to reply, that's just a technical issue, not.
Here for the course.
And please, if you have any questions for our guest, just share them and we'll get to as many as we can.
Yes, and we've got a great guest. But Martin, do we want to talk a little bit about what's to come? Because we are kicking off the season.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have a whole lineup of fantastic guests coming out over the next few months. And very excited about our next one, our good friend Ginny Dietrich, who was the creator of the Peso model and just a great person to talk to.
Yeah, can't wait. Well, how about we bring Dan into the broadcast? But first, a little bit about him. Dan Nestle is an award-winning strategic communications executive. He's a communications technology leader, and he's the host of the Trending Communicator podcast, which is a good show. I hope everybody checks it out. Most of all, Dan is a great guy. Martin and I consider him a friend. He's a colleague. And maybe you can all check him out on LinkedIn because I did not do his introduction justice. So you can find out more about Dan and connect with him there. So let me bring Dan in. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Deirdre, Martin, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. And all I have to say is I'm glad I'm not following Jeannie. She is, man, is she good. She's one of my idols. And, but I'm so pleased to be in such great company, especially you two. Jeez, what a pleasure.
Thank you.
An honor.
Thanks. And honestly, thanks for taking the time to come here because we know how busy you are too.
That's part of the entrepreneurial curse, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that's our topic today, from corp comms to entrepreneur. How's it feeling, Dan, being an entrepreneur?
It is, it's exhilarating and tremendously anxiety inducing at the same time. It is, I'm having just a blast though. It's so much fun. It really is the kind of, a lot of it has to do with the timing of things in my life and, the way that things have sort of settled out for me, both personally and professionally, that the timing is good. But, apart from that, it's a wild ride. And I still don't know where it's going to go. I just hope that it's going in the right trajectory at this point.
Well, welcome to the club, by the way.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. What can we say?
Yeah.
Before we get to our first question, though, a few of our audience members are coming in. Charlene Nadlin, who I've known for a long time. Nice to see you, Charlene. Jennifer, welcome.
Jennifer,
Iram,
hi.
Raymond, Jay from India, thank you for coming in. And please be sure to post any questions you have for Dan, and I'm sure you'll have lots of them as we go along.
All right. Well, Dan, maybe you could just tell us what made you shift? What's the motivation behind leaving corporate comms and starting your own company?
Well, first of all, it's not my first rodeo. I think in a lot of ways, I've always been a wanderer, from a career sense earlier on, for sure. If you look at the pre LinkedIn experience, you'll see that it's like kind of all over the place. But once I landed in the zone that I'm in, which is, marketing, communications, and certainly in the last 10 years, probably almost mostly PR and comms. I tried a few different things, and I started my own company back in 20 something years ago, and that was really it's funny because the entrepreneurial journey got me into corp comms in the first place, because I started out just, okay, I'm going to be a copywriter, and I built a little copywriting business just by luck and happenstance, I think, but also because I turned out to be a pretty good copywriter. And then, I picked up some clients and got on the corp comms journey eventually. So I've always had this kind of desire to be my own, like to have autonomy, more autonomy than anything else, and to pursue what I want to pursue, which is not always possible in the corporate environment. Not to say I didn't enjoy corporate comms and corporate marketing communications, et cetera. It was just always right. But this time around, I think we saw like a planetary alignment when first thing that happens is, I got really into Comtech and started to really dig forward in that field and got sort of somewhat known in that area within the comms profession. And then I started to look in what personal branding is all about, and started to get really friendly with the wonderful, amazing Mark Schaefer, who's an idol and a mentor of mine. And then, all the stuff is sort of converging. And then, I got involved in these communities, these learning communities. And all the while I'm doing corporate comms by day and sort of playing around with other stuff by night. I started to get really into, what if we could, this question, like, what if we could do this? What if you could, wouldn't it be great if? And in my last role, in my last business, with Lixil, if anybody looks at my LinkedIn profile, for a long time, the company was very, I think they were very encouraging in that respect. They did what they could to build out room for me to play. But then, the business environment changes and, things kind of evolve. And eventually, after a few years of doing some really great experimentation and some great work at Lixil, business diverged from business needs, and my particular direction diverged. And, eventually I got laid off, just like many people in our industry. And when I got laid off last year in June, by that point, I'd sort of built up that personal brand a little bit. And there's one other major thing that was happening at the time, which I'm surprised I haven't mentioned yet, which is the development of AI. And, being an early adopter, jumping on that ChatGPT initial launch, like in November of 2022, as soon as I got laid off, I knew like I have everything I need to build a company that I wouldn't have had even 3 years ago. I have my own accountant if I need it. I have my own, legal advice. Of course, I'd rather seek normal human legal advice, but like on the surface level, I could build my own team with just $20 a month and give it a go. So I had the pieces are in place, excuses gone. I had a certain degree of expertise. The timing was right. And, Lixil was wonderful. But it was enough time for me to go paint on a bigger canvas. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what a lot of us need, is that kind of one cataclysmic event that pushes us to do something that we've been thinking about for a long time, and we tend to overthink. I can tell you, for me, what happened was I was a TV writer for a show that was really fun to work on, but really hated in Canada. It was, everybody hated it, except for the people who worked on it for a number of reasons. Anyway, we're still surprised when we were canceled. So it was like, not only was I laid off, but everyone was.
Yeah.
And, there I was, had one child, another one close to being born. And I thought, what the heck am I going to do? Two things I wanted to do was start a bookstore, bricks and mortar bookstore, or do PR. Good thing I went to PR, because we know what happened with bricks and mortar bookstores. But Cindy, you don't have to do much to get started. And you have that momentum, that energy that kind of pushes you over the times where, you're not quite sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that's, you mentioned something too, Martin, is pretty critically important when it comes to timing, right? You have to look at your family situation. You have to look at your personal life. And, you said that you had a small children at the time. And, for me, when I first did the entrepreneurial journey, I didn't have any kids at that time yet, one on the way. But this time around, my kids are 18 and 20. So and they luckily chose very inexpensive educational options. So some of the pressure was really relieved. And that no joke, that has a lot to do with the choices that you make, right? So
Exactly.
the risk tolerance is much higher when you don't have a $60,000 a year tuition hanging over your head.
Right.
So
For
there's that
me,
too.
I had a little one at home,
Wow.
and I
Right.
knew that I needed to be at home more. So I started in a little office in my house, and it was just a fax machine and me and a phone. So that's really dating when I started as an entrepreneur.
So
But
first
it was
piece of
wild.
advice for everyone, get a fax machine.
Yeah.
Seriously. No,
Good
just
investment.
kidding. Don't want to do that. We have evolved a little bit
That's
from
too
there.
funny.
We have a question from Raymond. I'm just going to
Yeah.
pop it on here. How would I start a small company like a food distribution company, ketchup and mustard, for example?
A ketchup and mustard lover.
I mean, I could take a stab at that first because this is a show with PR and communications and marketing professionals. And I'm sure we know everything about ketchup and mustard and food services. You know, the answer is I wouldn't know how to start a company that is that has a product to sell, where you have an infrastructure to build and you have CapEx to think about and you have OpEx to think about. It's that's a much bigger decision process. And I'm sure investment is a bigger part of that. In the case of for lack of a better word, knowledge work, where you're being paid for just what comes out of your brain, and all you need is a keyboard, and a fax machine wouldn't hurt, but all you need is an internet connection and a computer. The upside, or the risk, and the startup risk is so much lower than if you're building a food services company, right? And there's a lot more things to consider, but it's about really understanding what the motivation is for doing ketchup and mustard in the first place, why you want to do that, and building up. If you have that much investment, I think the larger your investment, the larger the risk, the more detailed your plan needs to be moving forward. You can't really afford to be flying around and just pursuing different angles and changing your direction and pivoting all the time. Not to say that I do that so much, but I do a degree of that, right? You have to be flexible. You have less flexibility when you have infrastructure involved.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also say, just to add, for any business, it doesn't matter if it's ketchup, mustard, public relations, whatever you're doing, get a good lawyer and a good accountant.
Yes.
Yeah, and research the market. See what's there, taste the other products, talk to people in stores. It's funny, when I was a teenager, my dad said to me, he gave me the opposite advice of every other parent. He said, don't get a job, work for yourself. And at the time, just graduated from college, I wanted to get a job in an office. I didn't understand that. But what he did when he started his retail stores is he stood at a busy corner in Winnipeg, where I'm from, and counted people with shopping bags, because he wanted to see where people were actually buying versus, where there was just a lot of people for whatever reason. Maybe there's a bus stop or something else. I think you really have to know your audience and your market. One quick thing from James. Hi, James, who wanted to know which show it was. You'll have to ask me in class. James is a student of mine at the Sherlock School of Business. So remember to ask me after Reading Week. There is another question here from Iram, really about how to start a tech business, which is pretty similar to what we're doing. Yeah.
The core advice that you've heard so far applies. Do your research, know where in the personal branding work that I've done and sort of study that I've done and learning. One of the things that I was taught was find your sustainable interest. So what is it that you do or you offer, right, that you want to do and you enjoy and, or that you're passionate about, and where does that intersect with a need? So it's not enough to say, oh, I want to do a tech company, or, oh, I love coding, or, hey, I'm a great writer. That's essentially a great skill to employ for somebody else, maybe. But unless you have that identifiable need, that addressable need, then, you're basically going to be spinning wheels. So you have to do the work ahead of time to know what that sustainable interest is. And if you're relatively sure of what it is, nobody's ever like 100% certain, really, because otherwise it would be no risk and everybody would be entrepreneurs. But once you have a fair idea of that's where I want to go, then you do the research. If there's a market there, there's a market there, and you move forward. And as far as a tech company goes, I mean, you can't find a sector that's bigger or more successful or more growth oriented now, but it's also very risk prone. And what is the offer that you have that is either unique or addresses a market that's not being addressed properly? Answer those questions, and then you can take it from there.
Right. And solving a problem. If you can solve a problem and you can see a future that this problem is going to be around in 5-10 years, then you're onto something.
So what was your biggest challenge when you started this time around?
This time around, I think it's an ongoing challenge, actually. And one that I'm just happy to keep moving forward with is really nailing down what my offer is and what the business is, frankly, like all about. Because kind of like in an E-Myth style, I don't know if anybody's read the E-Myth, where you're either, most people start a company based on skills, and they think that that's going to win them business because they're good at something, and they end up working in the company rather than on the company, if that makes sense. So, that's, I think, where the challenge is am I working in the company or on the company? Like, so I am trying to balance that, because the work that we do in PR and comms, it's very, you can't just flip a switch, walk away, and expect good things to happen. You got to sit there and spend hours and think and strategize and write. And, even if you're using AI, right, you still need to put in the time.
Yeah.
So where's the time to work on the business? See, this is where the challenge is. There's the one thing that AI or nothing can do for us is to change the amount of times available in the day. So, when am I spending time on the business? When am I spending time in the business? And then, the more time I spend on the business, meaning looking at my audiences, looking at my targets, am I doing everything properly? The more kind of questions I have for myself, the more challenges arise, the more I realize, oh, shoot, I really need to change the messaging or pivot or do something else. And that's, that has been a continuous challenge for me, especially as you gain clients and you're like, all right, the 14 hours I was going to put in this week on, working on my website, forget that, because I have somebody who's going to pay me now. So, this is something that I think a lot of folks who are certainly starting consultancies really, really kind of have to plow through in the early days.
Dan, I have a question to follow up to this, because I know that when I owned an agency back in the day, we always went through this cycle of we're selling, and then we're servicing, and then we'd have to go into this sales mode because we'd have nothing in the pipeline. So do you find yourself doing that, or can you continuously sell as you're doing everything?
It's I've only been at it. Let me just put this out there. I have, I was laid off in June of last year. It took me a couple months to just I smelled the roses for a bit, took a trip to Greece, relaxed my family.
Nice.
And then started the real business in September, October-ish. So, in that time, I've been fortunate, got a couple of clients, and I'm able to now move forward and generate cash flow. But I do have that problem, still, it's you get the client and then you have to put in the time to do the work, and that's okay. that's time I can't be making connections and selling. So got to kind of put that further down the road. You keep kicking that down, and then you find yourself with a pipeline that may not be ideal. And I'm trying to avoid that, and
Right.
The only thing that I can sort of say about that is, I'm not scalable, and I have to figure out ways to build more either scalable business products or services, turnkey solutions where I can create something and, make that a sort of income generating stream. And I'm working on these things. But doing the servicing part of consulting is allowing me to pay for those things.
Right.
So, my timelines might not always match my plan or my idea, but, as long as I keep working on them and the market keeps telling me that it's needed, I'm going to keep doing that, but you do need to pivot every now and then because you can't keep up all the time as well.
Yeah. And it's hard, hearing you say that, I thought, wow, if AI agents can get right, imagine having AI agent Dan, who's really just the sales part of you, and you trust it enough to go out there and kind of make cold calls or book appointments for you, while you, creative Dan, can work on the creative and the strategic work. That would be fantastic. So maybe we should, after the webinar, just go away and kind of brainstorm how to do this. And so, I met a company that does exactly that. Conversational AI is taking us in crazy directions now.
Crazy.
So yeah, it's tempting to sign up with them. It really is. Have an agent do my outbound for me. Excuse me. That's where we live in. So it goes back to, you really don't need a lot to invest in a team anymore. That you can build a lot just yourself. Yeah.
So let me ask you, what are some of the tips that you found that worked, Dan, really to become a successful or entrepreneur, to push yourself on the way to success?
I think there's a couple things, and everybody has their own set of tips and pointers. I think there's a few things. The first is take a lot of meetings, right? You have to meet with a lot of people. Let's just call it sales, call it whatever. But even if it's even pre-sales, you have to talk to a lot of people. And, not only will they help you refine your business, but they're also the connections that you need to build your business, and start with your close connections, friends and family, so to speak, but people that and start there and really network the hell out of your network. The second thing is community, I think, has been a key for me. So one thing that's different now about, like, compared to 20 years ago, for sure, is there's a couple of communities of interest that I am very involved with, all digital, all online. Although, in some cases we have gotten to the point where we're meeting in person every now and then. But these communities are people who, they have your back, they trust you, you trust them. But they're not necessarily in your immediate business sphere. Great folks to be talking to about this stuff, and people who have advice for you and support and want to just give it to you. So these communities are sources of support, they're sources of learning, and they're sources of new ideas and interesting information. I guess the other thing, the other big tip is really learn AI. I mean, really, really get out there, and you don't have to be an AI oriented consultant or like what I'm doing, trying to really help mostly PR, but PR and marketing folks with embed AI in their content process. It's like, instead of going that route just for your own use and your own good, there are so many ways to get the work that you don't like to do done. And that tends to be a detractor or sort of a blocker for people who are starting their own business. Like, it's the drudgery of filling out the forms or doing the admin work and things like, oh, I have to write, these 45 emails today. I'm not saying you should outsource all of it, but that's where AI can help. And the final thing I would say is really, really do your research into what it takes to start your company from a financial process, legal standpoint. There is, it's one thing to say I'm a consultant and go out and just do business yourself and, just collect paychecks and deal with the taxes later. It's another thing to start a company. Whether you choose whatever form of that company you choose, an LLC or C Corp or whatever it is, you have legal obligations from that. You have insurance obligations. That was a new thing to me, was the insurance part. That took me by surprise. So, and now I know. So I, ended up with a little bit of a educational experience, learning about why I need insurance. But these are all these hidden costs, these kinds of extra things. Even if there's no overhead, there's always overhead. So keep that in mind.
Those are really good points. Dan, on the note of community, are you more social media communities online, or would you say offline is just as important?
Offline is incredibly important, especially, with that friends and family kind of approach, right? You trust people you meet more. And, as I learned from somebody who's on this call and not named Martin, there's a lot that you can learn from, that you need to absorb from people's facial expressions and from the way that, from listening and interacting with someone in person and for real, that cannot happen, in other situations. So yeah, definitely online and offline. But I like these kind of hybrid communities that have just grown out of interest. They're not brand based. So maybe it's best to give an example. I belong to something called the Rise community, and I've mentioned Mark Schaefer, and again, friend, author, he's done so much. He's been on my show. A couple of years ago, as an experiment, we decided to go onto Discord and start this and try to see if we could build a community that was all about Web3, right? We got about 25, 30 people. That has evolved, because clearly Web3 is not what we want to be talking about as marketers and communicators necessarily. But now that community has 300 or so people, and we talk about, we have channels for just AI marketing. We have channels for personal brand, and all these experts from all over the world are part of this. And we meet in person every now and then. We have get-togethers. So it's been a really great support system for me.
Excellent.
Martin,
any other questions?
I think we have time for one more question. I'm happy to ask her. Deirdre, do you want to?
Yeah, I think maybe we can end with, Dan, how do you measure success? What is success for you as an entrepreneur?
So, the first measure of success is survival for me.
Yes.
Honestly.
That's
those
right.
first 5 years.
Yeah, looking at, so you have to start, I think, from that financial kind of, that financial requirement. I think it was Daniel Pink who said a long time ago that the things you need for success are mastery, autonomy, and purpose, if your financial needs are met, right? So it's like, it's presupposing your financial needs are met. So make sure that you can survive. After that, though, success to me really means being able to do fun work, things I want to do, being able to explore and experiment. I do have bright, shiny object syndrome, and I embrace it. I love it. And I need to be creative. And one thing, breaking into this sort of entrepreneurial world has one of the blessings I've received is I have started these different creative projects, some that were terrible and some of them are wonderful. And, like I started an online, an AI driven meditation series for PR people on YouTube. It's hysterical. I think it's hysterical anyway. But, like I wouldn't have done anything like that unless I had this sort of thought in the shower that I could pursue in my time, So that's success to me, is like being able to continue to do that, to survive, and then, make my business into something that is sustainable. So, I've pivoted a few times. Pivot is maybe not the right term, but at least refined my approach, just learning more about what customers want, what clients want, changing, kind of being agile. Now I feel that the next step is going to be even better. And I know there's going to be next steps after that. So all those things are like, as long as I feel that progress, I have that that creative outlet, and making enough money, then I see that as being successful.
Well, I see a lot of next steps for you, Dan.
Yeah, and for all of us.
Too much luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, find your cash flow and then find your purpose. No, find your purpose, then your cash flow.
Yes.
Make sure that purpose is like intersects with a need,
Yes.
that's solving a problem, and then you can turn that into a cash flow.
Purpose, need, cash flow, and that's it. That's a secret. No, it's been great talking to you, Dan. Thank you for sharing your tips and kind of the hurdles, but also the great parts of the journey, because it is a journey and it keeps changing.
It is so much. I'll tell you, it's so much fun, and it's stressful. But if the fun stops, then my resume will start being sent out. But until then, I haven't looked for a job. I'm very focused on making this work, and so far it is. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Excellent. And somehow when it's stress for yourself, it's a little bit better rather than stress for somebody else's company.
Yep.
You can do it.
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dan. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And we will see you next month.
Yeah.
So
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.